Hello, everyone. I'm Alex from Materia,
I'm Andy, also from Materia.
and this is episode 0.
Yeah, we're here at Materia Arcade in Worcester, Massachusetts, and this is kind of a pilot episode where we're going to be talking about kind of our shared love for retro games, collecting retro games. Materia Arcade and Video Games is a retro game store with 13 authentic video game cabinets, arcade cabinets. And yeah, I met Alex through the store, and then Alex has been working on doing all of our social media and various other things. And I don't know, we've been talking about doing a podcast or some sort of live stream for a while. We've done some content on Instagram about kind of our top fives and everything. But I think we've had in the in between moments, we've had a lot of discussions about retro games. So this is our attempt to talk about that a little bit further. Um, I don't know. I think one thing that has always drawn me, or I've thought was interesting about our conversations, was the generational difference. And kind of I'm 42 years old, so I grew up kind of with all of these games. I can't, I don't remember like the Atari like golden age, but I definitely was a child in the 80s and 90s and grew up with the NES and SNES. And to me, that was always what dominated the conversation about retro games. But here in 2024, there's people that are collecting retro games that were born after 2000. So I don't know. I think this is a really interesting time that we've come to where I think there's a lot of interesting discourse to be had about retro games.
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely in the minority a bit with going back to cartridge games. I think at this point, even kind of on the whole, NES games like are not that popular. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a little bit of a non sequitur, but I was trying to figure out recently when I learned what a Sega Genesis was, because I definitely didn't. No one told me about the Sega Genesis. It's not. Everyone just kind of talks about the Nintendo consoles. For some reason, I knew what a Dreamcast was for a long time. I feel like that one has more of a kind of modern day reputation almost.
See that in itself is interesting. I would never guess that because coming from the other side of it, like the Genesis was what like was pushed so heavily and like did like make it into mainstream. And by the time the Dreamcast came out, like I think there was one kid at my high school that was like pumped about it and had one, and the rest of us were like N64 was pretty much dominating like everything. So that's interesting to hear that.
Yeah.
But I think that's what interests. Like, so I think running a game store and kind of seeing all the different generations come through the store, that's what's really been interesting to me, because I assumed when I opened that it would be like Super Nintendo cartridges would be like super popular, the things that everyone wanted, and a copy of Super Mario World, which is could arguably be one of the greatest games ever made, sits on the shelf for ever. And, you can't keep Mario Kart 64 on the shelf at all. I also, because of my old age, totally underestimated the power of Pokemon as like an item to always keep in stock. But I don't know. I mean, I think like one thing that we've wanted to focus on too is, what is the state of collecting retro games now, and where is it going? And another thing that is kind of surprised me, or not surprised me, but been very much at the forefront of everything we do here is, a lot of these the technology, the hardware is breaking down. Like it was always breaking down, like even when it came out, like especially with lesser made, consoles, but everything's breaking down now. So what does that even mean? And then I don't think anyone back in the day could have anticipated this thing called the internet and like pirating games. So I don't know. It was interesting. I think I kind of was an adult when pirating was happening, but you probably were not. And how did that shape like how you, I don't know, approached game collecting and all that? So I don't know. That's just like a.
Yeah, I mean, pirating has not always been a thing, but, well, I guess in the ocean. But, I mean, I don't know. I definitely grew up around my fair share of pirating, and I don't have anything against emulators, and I do use them sometimes, but it's just never that's kind of why I figured I needed to start collecting games. It's mostly like, I'd want to I'd want to play some Pokemon DS game or something, and then I tried to emulate it, and it's like I can't get through like an hour or two of the game. I just can't focus because it's on my computer. Emulating DS games just sucks in general also.
Yeah.
So I was like, I need to get the physical versions of this. I know you were saying you underestimated the power of Pokemon. Like that's literally like
Well, that was just me being stupid.
yeah, no, but that's like 100% of the reason I'm here. Pretty much is Pokemon. Like that was the first old games I ever tried to buy were Pokemon. I got Black and White too, and like when I have those, I keep the GameStop sticker on it because I got it in 2014 for like $30. But even back then, I remember I was looking for like Heart Gold and Soul Silver. And I asked a guy at GameStop, and I was like 12, and he laughed at me for it. He was like, "You're not going to find a copy." I was like, "Great, dude." So I guess those ones have just always been expensive.
Yeah. Well, I kind of maybe want to reset the conversation in a second, but I think one interesting thing that we're kind of talking about is accessibility. And it's interesting to me that we're living in an era where to access the original game is, there's a financial gate there for a lot of people. But if you go online and pirate it, it's all of a sudden more accessible. But I guess there's also, technology like gatekeeping there if you're not willing to figure out how to steal it.
Yeah, I mean, I think emulation for older consoles is definitely extremely accessible. But like to emulate anything like 6th to 7th and up, obviously, gen, you need like a very powerful computer at that point. So
Yeah.
it's not really much of a cost difference, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, so I said I want to reset the conversation. What do you think? I think a big part of what I want to explore in these conversations moving forward past this episode is, like I said, what is the state of retro games today? But maybe you could define, or we could each define, like what does collecting video games mean to you? Like, and how has that changed like over the years? Like you were just talking about how keeping the GameStop stickers and all that. Like, what are the important components of collecting that make it like an interesting hobby for you?
Yeah, I think definitely my biggest thing with why I collect is I want to have like my own library almost. Like the games that I have are games that I think are worth being in arm's reach, pretty much. This is a silly example, but I remember recently I stored my Xbox 360 at my parents' house along with my original Xbox, and I would just play like backwards compatible games, which means I had to store all of my 360 games I could no longer play. And I also slimmed down my Wii games, and the result of that is that I no longer could play the console version of the Bakugan game from 2008, and I realized that, and it like actually kind of stressed me out. I was like, I don't know, I've had that game. I could play that game at any point for every other point in my life, and now I've gotten rid of it. I did get my Wii version back, so we're all good. But yeah, I think it's a lot of it for me is just I want the games I have to reflect who I am and to reflect which ones I think are worth keeping around, and I think it also is important to differentiate like the games I care about versus the games I'm maybe told to care about.
Right. Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting topic. Like what we're told to care about, or like how I think that's the internet has definitely played a role in, the collector market in terms of, I mean, I think we've all Googled, I don't know, Sega Genesis hidden gem or Sega CD hidden gems, or I don't know, like the hidden gems thing is like, it's funny. That's a thing. Like, are there any hidden gems left? But I think games that are important to you, well, I don't know what made those games important to you though.
I mean, a lot of it's curiosity because obviously I have a lot more games than I've realistically could play. There are obvious ones, like there are just series I like Pokemon or Digimon or Fire Emblem or whatever, where I'll pretty much always get a game as long as it's not completely horrible. But then a lot of the times it is just kind of looking at the cover, maybe looking up like a review or two, making sure the game works pretty much. And, as long as it kind of looks interesting, I'm generally willing to try it out. Then, if I don't like it, I don't keep it.
See, that's fascinating to me because back in the day, the artwork didn't necessarily the artwork on the cover didn't necessarily match the gameplay or the or anything about the game.
Mega Man.
Yeah, well, even, yeah, Mega Man for sure, but even like in the Atari era, like you have these like kind of beautiful 70s, 80s illustrations,
Yeah, like
sci-fi
poster.
illustrations and stuff, and then the game is like literally a block.
Dots.
Yeah. Um, but it's funny that I mean I think it's interesting. I mean obviously I think as humans that's how we make decisions about things, and obviously the cover art is more indicative of what you're going to experience to some degree and what's on the back of it in reviews like you said and all that. Uh, yeah, I don't know. I think the other thing you mentioned that's interesting is just I think there's interesting times I think in our lives where like our the context of our lives allow us to explore things, and I definitely look back at my like 20s and 30s, or even in my childhood, literally everything up into like having responsibilities like a child and running a business and like things like that that obviously take priority over playing games, but so yeah, beware of your life choices. But I don't know. I look back at like time, like I've told this story before, but when I moved to New York, I was kind of going through like a breakup, and I just locked myself in my room and played Wind Waker for I don't even know how long, 60 straight hours or something. And that game has a fondness to me because of that experience, and that is one of the games. Like I've sold a lot of the games from my own collection here at our store to keep the doors open, but that's a game I will never sell probably because that is the copy that was with me during that like moment. And I think it's for me like collecting kind of has become more about like what are these games that mean something to me, or like on the other end of the spectrum I've kind of started collecting like trashed Genesis cartridges, also kind of from the lens of a game store owner where I'm going to put my best product on the shelf. So what does that leave for me? Well, ripped up Genesis cartridges, but like I don't know. It's kind of like, well, somebody needs to take those, or like what what's going to happen to this copy of Super Street Fighter where the label's completely ripped off? Like it's just gonna like I don't know who is that for. So I don't know, but I think that that's another interesting thing about time, where so much time has passed since these games have come out. Like what is going to happen with them? Are they just going to sit on shelves in someone's house until there's like a nuclear disaster or some sort of war or something, or is it going to like when video game museums, which are already happening, like become more prolific, like are things going to find their ways into like I don't know, like we've talked about like what is a parallel kind of comparison to other like collector markets, and we had talked about like you keep bringing up records, and I've talked about like art, like the collecting like fine art, and I don't know, I think there's a lot of interesting trajectories video game collecting can go, especially now that so much time has passed. But yeah, I don't know if anything I just rambled about
I think
does anything for you there.
no, that's definitely interesting. I think it's definitely worth bringing up the fact that everything's deteriorating, and I hate to say it, but from the lens of looking at games as objects, the only ones that are really going to be preserved are the ones that are like graded or in museum like settings, because obviously there's nothing wrong with playing games that you buy. I think you should play them, but it's going to wear on them. Like if you're a game collector that plays your games and isn't literally putting them in like a heat controlled like sun free room, you're not preserving them, you're deteriorating them, which is fine, but like
that was another thing that really hit me right before I opened the store was like just looking at my shelves and my collection and being like, what am I trying to achieve here? Like my house could burn down, or someone could break in and steal all this stuff, and what is that, what so, and if that happened, like what would I do, and does that change like my perspective on why I'm collecting this, or what I'm collecting, or to what degree I'm collecting? Like, I know a lot of people that have some pretty insane items in their collection, but but I don't think they have the ability to keep it. And it's funny. There's someone here at the store right now. Like, no one comes in during our open hours, but everyone tries to like come in
Yeah,
while we're
closed.
and recording videos. Anyway, I don't know. That was one thing that I don't know. It was like being a first time homeowner and having actually like insurance to cover this, but it also was like I don't know. It just made me like think about things beyond like kind of what you said, like having games like accessible to me. Because I've also feel like I've collected things in a similar way where it was like, I wanted these Fire Emblem games to be accessible to me at all times, like or like all the Souls games, or what, like I wanted to be able to play that. But that's also kind of an interesting topic we could explore further because that to me has like digital versus physical implications as well. And I've downloaded a lot of digital games on my Switch because they were physical copies of games I had physical a long time ago that I had gotten rid of or didn't want to take up the shelf anymore, or from a game preservation standpoint, like this is now the definitive version of this game. Like, do I really need my old Xbox copy of KOTOR? So I think that's a topic for another episode, but I don't know. I guess to kind of recap, I think for all these episodes, I'm kind of coming at this as from the perspective of longtime game collector who decided to open a video game store and how that changed my perspective on things. And I've always been interested in these conversations with you because the generational difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. I guess for the physical aspect, it really is for me about kind of letting it all be inconvenient. Like I don't know, I enjoy figuring out how to hook my PS2 up to a modern TV, and then I like running that through a thing to get it to display on my computer. Like all that, just working with this technology and being around it is something I enjoy. And, increased convenience and increased ease of access to these things is obviously important for a lot of reasons. But I think for people that really want to get immersed in this world, you have to be a little kind of like reverent and arbitrary about it to get that full experience. Like, it'd be weird if you found someone who like a huge part of their personality was that they like music and then they kept up what was going on and they're like, oh, I don't go to shows or buy records or anything, I just listen on Spotify. You kind of side like, do you really care about music that much then? That's I don't know, maybe you wouldn't, but that's kind of my takeaway from it.
But I think there are people, I think the generation like younger than like the next two generations down from you, I think are people who are probably only listening to music on Spotify and can say they're really into music and probably will never own a piece of physical media.
I mean, I guess we'll see, but also I think they're also too young to even like they don't have their own money or cars to buy records, so they use their family's Spotify subscription.
Yeah.
But it's like I just think not necessarily that they have to grow up around these things being like the norm or anything for them to kind of adapt to this way of life. It's more, if you care about a thing, you're going to want to dedicate time to it. And it's almost like if I was just playing emulators and just, downloading every single game I wanted off the internet right when I wanted it, it wouldn't be the same. Why would I ever focus on a game if I didn't spend money on it and I don't have it taking up space in my house? Why would I don't want to play it like with a little, even a tiny bit of input lag. I don't care. Like, I'm not a competitive gamer or anything, but it's like, it still does feel different. And like, you're not using the original controller. It displays, even if the display is nicer, it's not the same or what it was meant to be. So like, yeah, it's not any practical like viewpoint you look at this from. It's like just emulate pretty much. It's always going to be more convenient and easy, but from the perspective of someone who just genuinely cares about video games as like a medium and as like an art history, it makes sense for me to own these things physically.
Right. What's your financial ceiling for a game though?
Well, okay, so for a long time I was saying I would never spend over $60 on a game.
Okay.
I've gone against that 4 or 5 times
Okay.
probably and spent more. Um, I mean, it scales. Like, there's a world where I would spend, 110, 120 on a game I really wanted. Like, it'd have to be like, from a series that there's really no other way for me to play. And like, if someone offered me like a copy of Earthbound or something for, not Earthbound, not actual Earthbound prices, maybe a little more reasonable in the like
Yeah.
120, 150 range, I'd probably do it. I wouldn't be thrilled about it. But that is like, it is very much a graph of how much I care about the game versus how much I'll pay for it. And I don't know. I feel like with a lot of other collectors, it's almost like they want games to be expensive a lot of the time, or it's like I wish every game was $5. It'd be sick and a
Yeah.
lot easier for me.
Yeah. I do you think I mean, I don't think either of us collect it like a lot. Like, I mean, obviously what you were just saying about $60 and everything. Like, I don't think
Mm-hmm.
either, and I don't even know what the most I've ever paid for a game. I've definitely gotten like crazy deals on games
Mm-hmm.
that ended up being worth a lot of money.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
And or things that I held on to as a kid ended up being worth a lot. Um, I don't know if I've ever paid more than $100 for a game, I guess. So I guess my next question, which doesn't really apply to either of us, but it's like, what do you think is more fulfilling, like collecting in that like low and mid tier level and trying to find like oddities, or like trying to find some grail and then obtaining it? For me, I like the disconnect there is like, what do I do then? Like, because I've had those moments where like, yes, I finally got that game I wanted, even if it was only $50, and then I like pop it in and it's like sucks, or I've played it on emulation
Mm-hmm.
before and then I just put it on my shelf and it's like, I don't know. See, to me, that experience has always been kind of anticlimactic in some ways.
Yeah.
Like, I think what I try to get out of what I've been interested in, the things I'm interested in collecting, and things I'm interested in video games, like exploring the technology limits, like you were saying, like those things are more interesting to me than putting something a grail on my shelf, because I've always felt those moments were anticlimactic. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What do you think?
So I guess first responding to the part about what's most satisfying, I don't really think I've I feel like I'm a person who just genuinely does not value money, and what I mean by that is not that like I'm not the greatest with money. Obviously, that's why I'm here. But I'm not the worst. I'm
Hi, my name's
financially
Alex. I'm addicted to video games.
yeah, no, but I'm financially responsible enough. I have yeah, whatever. I don't need to get into my financials.
Yeah,
But my point is, the it's just literally like I would rather have a copy of Disgaea than $30. I don't care about the $30. It doesn't make me happy having more money. It makes me happy having more versions of Disgaea.
But if you had more money, you could buy even more expensive,
More extreme
more extreme.
versions. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. And I guess also going to the part about it being dissatisfying. I just feel like that's kind of how everything works.
Yeah.
You want a thing and then you get it, and like wanting it is almost more
Yeah.
enjoyable than getting it. So yeah, that's just the loop of life, and I've accepted that. But any rare games or expensive games I've gotten, it's either because I got an absurdly good deal on them, or there's something I've wanted. So like, I found out about the game Ribbit King, which is just some weird golf game on the GameCube. I heard about it in a YouTube video, and I was like, that seems awesome. I want this. I looked it up, $200. Okay, I'm not gonna buy that. But if you wait long enough, some guy outside of a GameStop will sell you Ribbit King for $5. So that happened, and that's how I got that. And Ribbit King's legitimately one of my favorite games now. It's like such a great arcade golf game. But also, the converse of that is Pokemon Coliseum, which I just had my brother get for me as a graduation gift. Thank you to my brother for that. But yeah, that game is expensive, and it was worth it. I guess it wasn't worth it to me, but it was worth it to ask someone else to do it because I love Pokemon so much. And I don't know, I haven't played it yet, so I can't say I'm gonna be fully satisfied with it. But a lot of these old Pokemon games in my head have like almost a mythology around them just because Pokemon was something I was super into as a kid. I'd always watch these YouTubers talk about the old Pokemon games, and I didn't even have like a DS yet at that time. I was that's how I learned about emulation. But when I put in Pokemon Snap for the first time, which obviously is not as expensive, it blew me away. Like, I don't know, it was pretty much everything I wanted, and I couldn't have asked for anything more. So I have not been dissatisfied that much with games. Obviously, there's times where I buy a game and I don't like it, but usually it was $20 and it was like some random Wii game. So whatever, I'll sell it. But I think, it's either I'm in a mode where I'm just genuinely curious and I'm like, I have no expectations for this game, but it looks interesting, let's try it. Or it's a game I genuinely want, and then usually I'm able to not talk myself out of liking it too much.
So if you were trapped on a desert island and only had one game, it would be Pokemon Snap. That's what I'm hearing.
It would be Skyrim, but Pokemon Snap I'd consider.
Well, I think, we'll see how these recordings go, but I definitely have met a bunch of people who collect like grails and have like some pretty impressive collections, and I'm really, these are people who are my friends. Like, I'm not like, that's not what I get out of collecting. So I think it's easy, and I've said this to you before, to sound like judgy or whatever about that, and that's definitely not it. Like, I'd like to even have them talk with us too, and we can have that like third perspective about what they're what it does it for them in terms of all that. I definitely have people I follow on social media who do some pretty impressive content with their collections, all the way from people who are like invested in kind of like documenting historically like games that are super inaccessible, all the way to like just making their display of these things a work of art in itself. Like, I do appreciate that and get that. I wish in some ways that seems simpler to me than whatever I'm trying to do. But I think it's all fascinating. I think the other thing that kind of reminds me of is something we were talking about yesterday, which is like the acknowledgement that this is a hobby and there's a community around the hobby. Like, I think that kind of gets lost sometimes in the kind of individualized aspects of collecting or whatever. I guess I should turn my phone off when we do these.
It's all right, live and learn.
Yep. But I'm hoping as we do more of these too, we can get feedback and opinions from people in real time, even potentially at some point. But I don't know. I think the community aspect of this is super important, and I think as things become more in disrepair or more difficult to find, I think that's going to be important too. Or even just like the emulation part of it. Like, a lot of it you can find online if you're savvy enough, but I do think even having a community of people that you can be like, hey, I got all this way and then there was this roadblock, what do I do now? Like, that was one thing that drew me to the arcade machines. Was in some ways it was kind of like the ultimate like physical analog form of trying to get something to work, like, because you run into all these problems, but the community of people around the arcade cabinets is on a whole other level. I found like people, and I thought it was going to be intimidating, but it was like people readily willing to help you out, send you parts, send you pictures, like spend an incredible amount of their own personal time to help you troubleshoot something. Like, I never really encountered anything like that before, and I don't know. I love the arcade machines. Collecting those has been more rewarding than anything else I've done from a video game collecting standpoint, which is completely ironic because maybe we can talk about this in a future episode, because there was definitely a point where I was like downsizing everything I could to just like portable consoles and portable libraries, because I wanted my like video game footprint to be like incredibly small, and then I started buying arcade machines, which doesn't make any sense, but but that was one reason I opened the arcade, was I didn't want these in my house. But yeah. I don't know. Is there anything else? I'm kind of just looking at the time. We probably have like 10 more minutes if you want to talk about anything else.
I don't know if we just start any completely new topics. I guess I agree with you that, there are many ways to go about things, and at the end of the day, it is all just using money questionably, so who cares what your exact philosophy is about it. Um, I think I definitely get what you mean about like setting it up almost as a work of art, especially if there's like a specific series someone really likes or something, and they're like, here's all the Final Fantasies and all my random figurines and stuff. Like, I think that stuff is pretty cool, even if they aren't necessarily playing the games. Um, it's just really not what I'm doing, and there's something else I wanted to respond to about the arcade machines that you were saying, but about the community thing. It's like I think the arcade machine community is so much more like readily available and willing to be there because that's the only way anything works. So once we're at the point where all of the Xboxes and all of the NESs are broken, I think we will see a little bit more of that from the video game community because you need to it's no longer going to be you can just walk into a store or walk to a yard sale, somebody has a working PS2, you take it home and you're good. You're going to need to find someone who can help you fix it. So you will just ultimately need to rely on more other people. It'd be cool if there could be more of a community. I think it will happen naturally. I think also video game collecting as a community is just in a weird spot right now because it went from like being a very underground thing where there was tons of abundance to, in the span of basically a decade, maybe even less, everything all of a sudden, all these new people are entering the hobby. All of the video games that you like are going to be bought and they're going to disappear and you're not going to get them anymore. So, everyone's kind of your enemy and you need to just collect as quickly as possible. So I think, the people that have gone into that wave have maybe lost the plot a little bit, which, they'll figure it out. But I don't know. I think we're just in a very weird spot right now as a hobby, but I don't think it'll stay this way forever. Like, the lower ceiling on how much video games cost has gone up a bit just because they're getting older and inflation and everything. You're not going to find every game for 50 cents anymore. But like, I don't think paying $15 for an old game is absurd. I think that's fair enough if that's where we're at. But I do think all of the other kind of more inflated prices that are just based on kind of fear will go down at least a little bit. That'll kind of level out. People will realize, hey, I'm not going to, pay off my tuition by buying video games. They're not that great of an investment. And I think it will be interesting as all this is calming down to see where we come out on the other side. But I don't think video game collecting is like doomed or something. We're just kind of in a transitional spot.
Yeah. Well, I do think it's also the market is dictated, and this has obviously been well discussed ad nauseum, but like the generation that is at the age with the most disposable income, what that generation is having nostalgia for at that moment is always going to be, I think, driving the market. Like right now, it's like GameCube stuff is like super hot, and N64 stuff is still hot but cooling. SNES stuff and NES stuff is like, unless you're trying to find like a super rare like boxed game, like it's not really there. I thought of a weird analog actually to video game collecting that I hadn't thought about before, and this is probably not going to do anything for anybody watching this, but but it's actually more like getting really into wine, which, hear me out. So I was like really into the movie Sideways for some reason because I'm a weirdo, but like there's like people who collect wine that have these huge like wine cellars, and it's like, yeah, this bottle of wine is $5,000, but like when you drink it, like does it really taste like a $5,000 bottle of wine, or does it taste like a $50 bottle of wine? And are you like, is your palate like, trained enough to decide the difference or whatever? But then in Sideways, the main character, he's like a really poor like aspiring writer who is an English teacher like in middle school or something, and there's a scene where he does have this one bottle of wine that means something to him because of when he got it in his lifetime, and it's also it's like peaking in flavor at that moment. But there's a scene where he goes to his house and he goes into his closet and he like pulls out this like box with like his 3 bottles of wine that he's been holding on to, and he like decides to drink this one bottle. But I don't know, that to me, like, I like, my collection is, a lot of it is in boxes right now, and the games that mean a lot to me are just like shoved away in a box. But if I wanted to go get it, I know where it is. I can find it. I can play it and experience it. I don't know. For me, like that, I've always gravitated more towards that end of things. Not like the huge wine cellar part of it, but I don't know. Something you were saying when you were talking about that reminded me of that movie.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I will say a couple things to that. One is, it's interesting from my perspective going back to old games because, you know, not every, like you said, not every like $5,000 bottle of wine is better really than a $50 bottle of wine. Yeah. And that's not even, that doesn't have to be something like cost. Like, you know, there's this random PS2 3D platformer called Scalar. You've probably seen it. It's around. It's like $8. Nobody cares about it. But it's like a good 3D platformer. And I was playing it recently and I was like, this is legitimately like better than Crash Bandicoot. Like but just because of Crash Bandicoot's like innovation, and when it came out, that's the game that gets all the praise and everyone like hypes up. Like your favorite JRPG doesn't have to be Final Fantasy. You can like Scalar more than Crash Bandicoot. Like I had a photo professor who would always talk about like the canon of like photo history, and was like, this is Ansel Adams, you got to know this, it's the canon. And it's like, you know, I get that from like a art history perspective, like caring about the most important or the most prominent figures in your art form. But you know, like yesterday you were saying, in some ways, like game collecting is almost like the fine art market. And I don't want that. Like, I don't think fine art's good for the medium of painting or anything.
Well, I agree. I mean, and I think that's what makes it interesting as a hobby is because like I couldn't start collecting fine art. Like I don't have the budget for that or the money or even if I had the interest. Again, it goes back to like, why would I put a painting in my house? Even if I could afford this painting, why would I put it in my house where the painting's worth more than my house? Like I don't know, those are all these really interesting like financial components to me that now at this point in my life I find interesting. But I agree. I think like one thing that is really a part of this hobby that I really love is it is accessible to anyone. You can start collecting at any level. Like if you want to start collecting janky old Genesis cartridges, you could probably get 100 cartridges in your collection pretty quick and pretty fast. And yeah, where the things that are like kind of like we had a copy of Darkwing Duck for NES that came in, complete in box. It's a really good game. It was, a Capcom Disney game on NES. Like that was like all those Capcom games are pretty good, and the teams working on those games back then, like the music is great. Like it's a solid game. Mm-hmm. Is that game worth $300-$400 complete in box? I don't know. Is it better like if you were just getting into the hobby? Should you try to hunt down a copy of Mega Man or a game like Mega Man that's on like all these collections that you can play? Or I don't know. It's like it's really interesting, but I do think I agree with what you said about fine art. Like there's definitely higher financial gates preventing people from doing that. But you could also buy local art at your local coffee shop.
Yes, that's true.
It might not be good, but it's no Ansel Adams. But
we didn't get him for our weekly. Yeah.
Right. Anyway, I think we're probably close to time, and
cool.
No one's really watching anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But I don't know, to recap, I was just going to say, this is Andy and Alex. We're here at Materia Arcade in Worcester, Massachusetts. It is a video game store. We do have arcade cabinets. If you live in New England, you should definitely come check it out if you like video games. And I hope to keep making more videos like this and have more, community participation in this type of stuff too. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So if you did watch this whole thing, thank you. That's awesome. And we're excited about making more stuff in the future.
And if you do want to follow us on social media,
yes.
Materia _Machina, MACHINA is pretty much our handles for everything on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok and whatnot. So
on Twitch, we're Materia Machina Live. because all of the variations were taken.
Sweet. Materia Machina Life. Love it.
Yes.
Cool.
All right. Thank you.